Narcissism has taken the world by storm. The topic of narcissism has taken the whole world by storm. Wow, it has taken the whole world by storm. Everyone is talking about it. Everyone is being awakened to the fact that there is such a thing as narcissism. It is a real thing and it cannot be ignored. The world is being awakened, whether they like it or not, to the toxic effects of narcissism in the way it presents itself in the world. But there is a gap I would like to start filling from this video going onward. Let me set out this process by pointing out these two camps, which are very important, and I'll be trying to bridge them because I am not bashing any. The first camp is the professional camp. So these are people who have gone and acquired specific training that gives them the qualifications and the certifications to show that they are competent to deal with this topic of narcissism. They do a great job. Like I said, I'm not bashing any. They do a great job, and I wish that more of us would actually get to join those classes, study about the DSM-5s, study about psychology, study about psychiatry, and all those kinds of things. They are important disciplines in being able to address this topic, which is now my passion, narcissism. The second group are the spiritualists. Usually, these are people who've been trained by life. They've been to the school of life, okay? And the more of their training or more of their standpoint comes from a basis of experience, whether the experience of others or the experience of self, or both, mostly both. And they are able to derive supernatural lessons about this topic. This is where I would like to come in. Both camps, because I've not seen any, whether the professional camp or whether the spiritual camp, I haven't seen any who adequately describe where this issue of narcissism really came from. Okay? I haven't seen any, and that's what I want to start doing. If you went to the professional side of things and you asked them what the source of narcissism is, they would say something like, when the narcissist was a child, they experienced a traumatic event, and this was their response to this traumatic event. Their brains shut down and refused to grow, and therefore they became adults adults having still maintained that childish mind. Now, I have refuted this before in other videos. It's easy to refute that. They should just admit that they have no explanation for where narcissism really comes from. Then we have the spiritual camp, which comes along and says, you know what? There is such a thing as a spiritual world. There are 3 dimensions that you are dealing with as professionals, and we acknowledge it because you give us terms that enable us to describe this issue. You give us signs and symptoms, just like a doctor would be able to do when it comes to a disease. However, there are dimensions which are higher than the 3-dimensional world that we live in. And we are now, as spiritualists, addressing this topic from a higher dimension than the 3D world that you can see. Because the source and the ending of narcissism has nothing to do with the 3D world. For you to be able to get to the root of the matter, you must be able to exceed the three-dimensional world, to be able to acquire an accurate view, which is very necessary, because there is no solving this issue if you cannot understand the cause. And that is why the spiritualist would argue, and correctly so, that a professional cannot solve the issue of narcissism. And no professional will disagree. If you know of any professional, please link their channels to my comment section. I would love to hear any professional, because I haven't heard yet, and I've listened to many of them. None of them has come out and acknowledged that they could find a solution to narcissism. When they talk about narcissism, like we all do, they do it in order to help us to protect ourselves, but they don't do it so that they can be able to cure narcissism. So there's an agreement on both parties, or on both ends, that the issue of narcissism has no cure. There's no cure for it. There is no solution for the narcissist once they turn into a narcissist. Well, now I want to go a bit deeper, because at this point in time, we need to acknowledge one thing. The narcissists in question are people that we know. They are people that we have come to love, people that we have come to care for. They are our parents, they are our lovers, they are our children, they are our bosses, they are our colleagues, they are our friends. Therefore, explaining away this issue is not that easy. Just stating the facts about it doesn't make it easily receivable. And you have found that actually many victims of narcissism have a struggle, because if they were to accept what I've just stated, they would have to admit that these people they have come to care for, these people they have come to love, these people they have come to cherish, have no hope. If the psychologist and if the spiritualist both acknowledge that there's no cure for narcissism, on the ground it would mean for the people that there's no hope for these people they wish could acquire a solution. Now, this is where I want to come in. More accurately, this is where I want to begin to come in, because this is just the first video among many that will come up in the future, where we will delve deeply into many issues arising, and into how to navigate around this world that we have found ourselves in. The first thing I want to start to do, because of the deeply emotional, mental and psychological and even spiritual connection or nature of this topic, I have to give us a description of the source of narcissism. Because we will have to understand it if we are really to accept what both the professionals and the spiritualists say. Because if you do not give us an adequate explanation in detail of how this issue really comes about, deep down, how will you be able to convince me really that this issue has no solution? So in setting out to try and make it really clear what the real source of narcissism really is, I hope that this will empower those who are victims or survivors of narcissistic abuse to be able to accept, and it will be able to empower them to step out and do what they need to do. The word narcissist is not in the Bible, it's not in the Quran, it's not in all these spiritual books. And you might wonder to yourself, um, especially when you're dealing with a narcissist from church or a religious narcissist, who would very easily just throw that word away and throw you under the carpet by saying things like, this word narcissism is not even in the Bible. So don't listen to that guy. He's, instead of helping people, he's just uh, labeling people. Of course, it's very convenient for these religious narcissists to say such a thing, because while they are making victims uh, of their narcissism in these vulnerable places like spiritual circles and whatnot, they need a defense. They need something to keep them disguised. Because once they are exposed for who they are, then they will have no hold no more. By understanding this video, you will be able to come to a very, very competent place for being able to apply this issue to your life and to the life of others. Now, the word narcissist comes from Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, there's a young man, a very good-looking young man called Narcissus. And because of his looks, everyone desired him. I won't give you the whole story, but the main points. So because everyone desired Narcissus, he became a little full of himself. Now, one day, there are many variations to this story, by the way. Now, I'll give you one or two. One day, he met with a lady called Echo, who was very in love with Narcissus. Echo herself was very beautiful. She was a very lovely woman. And she stalked Narcissus through the forest as he was walking on by, thinking that she had managed to keep herself silent. The branches that were breaking behind her betrayed uh, a stalker. So Narcissus would turn back and call out, "Hey, who's there?" And Echo, who had received a curse because of a part of the story I have not given you, was not able to speak. She was dumb. She could only echo back whatever was heard. So she responded, "Hey, who's there?" And anything that Narcissus said in that direction, Echo echoed back. Therefore, Narcissus thought to himself that it was just the echo of the forest. There's no one really following me. And he went on by until one day, Echo was just too overwhelmed with the romantic feelings for Narcissus. And when she caught up to him, she wrapped her arms around him and expressed her love for him. But Narcissus spitefully rejected her and told her that he was not capable of loving anyone apart from himself. Distraught and heartbroken, Echo went back into the forest and faded away. Just faded away. While she was fading away, she talked to the god called Nemesis and she asked Nemesis to really have mercy on her and to consider how Narcissus had treated her and rejected her, and to punish him for his self-absorption. Narcissus, who had been observing, he had been observing all the things that Nemesis, the god Nemesis, who had been observing everything that Narcissus was doing, decided to punish him. So he lured Narcissus to a pond where Narcissus squatted and got down to his knees and looked upon the waters on the surface. And for the first time, Narcissus was able to see himself. And he was able to see a reflection of how good looking he really was. Now, because of his good looks, some variations, which all end in death, narrate it this way. The first one goes like this. He was not able to stop looking at his reflection. He was so full of himself that he looked at it until the day he faded away and just died and turned into the Narcissus flower. The second variation of the story goes like this. While he was looking upon his reflection, he was so enamored by himself that he tried to kiss himself in the reflection, thereby falling into the water and drowning to death. Then he grew into the Narcissus flower. Another variation of the story was a man called Armenian who was pursuing this Narcissus still. I know for us it's, but anyway, I'm just giving the story. So Armenian came and tried to win Narcissus' heart. And Narcissus was angry with him. Narcissus gave him a sword and told him, you know what? Remove yourself from me. Armenian was not able to take the rejection. He killed himself. And then the story repeats itself. The god Nemesis saw what had happened, lured Narcissus to the pond of reflection, where Narcissus committed suicide and died, turning into a daffodil flower or something. Mind you, Narcissus' mother was named after a flower, so that makes sense why everyone thinks Narcissus turned into a flower himself. Now, in these stories I'm giving, mind you, I've not given you the Roman version, but this is basically, I'm just trying to show you where the word narcissist comes from. It comes from a person, from this myth, where this young, attractive man called Narcissus was so self-absorbed with his looks and his beauty that he was not able to relate with anyone in the world. And as human beings, this is the thing, we are social creatures. You cannot be able to function as a human if you are absorbed with yourself. If you are excessively absorbed with yourself, you cannot be able to function as a human being, because human beings, we are not tigers. We are not lone rangers. We are social creatures, and you cannot operate as a human being if you are self-absorbed. That's all. And if you try to operate as a self-absorbed person in a social system, there are very severe consequences that you will bring upon yourself and upon those who come into contact with you. Because by nature, it is destructive to a social system for a character inside it to be operating as a lone ranger. You understand me? Well, I've given you basically this, the etymology of the word, or the story behind the etymology of the word narcissist. So every narcissist in the world is actually named after Narcissus. It's basically anyone who is self-absorbed and who cannot be able to love anything but themselves. Now, let us cross over to this other side of spiritualist, which is where I want to come in. Spiritualists acknowledge demonic power behind narcissism. All spiritualists. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. All spiritualists, when dealing with this topic of narcissism, acknowledge demonic influence. It is not possible to become a narcissist without a demon. That is the stand of anyone who is taking the spiritual stand, including myself. But this is where I want to bridge the gap between the two, the professionals and the spiritualists. It is that the spiritualists, while they acknowledge that demons are the source of narcissism, do not actually give you the source of the demons. They don't tell you where these demons come from. They don't tell you their end. And they do not tell you about what will happen to the narcissist as a result of this. They do it only to some degree. Just like the professionals can only, and that's the only thing they can do, is to observe the traits and the signs and the effects of this toxic trait, this destructive personality disorder, as they call it. They cannot go beyond that, give you the cause and the ending. All right? But the spiritualists can go a bit further. However, they are not able to explain the source of these demons, which they accurately describe as the influences behind narcissism. This is what I will be setting out to answer in this post, because there is a historical event that led to this, and it is found in the Bible, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14. Now, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, we have God who created the world. We have Satan, who is the enemy of God. And while Satan was one of the angels of God in heaven, he was one of the highest ranking angels in heaven. In chapter 14, verses 13 to 14, there are what are called 5 I will statements that Satan gave. He said, I will ascend into heaven. I will go into the mount of the congregation to the sides of the north. I will be like the Most High. So there are 5 I will statements, as they have come to be called, that Satan gave before an event that is described in Revelation chapter 12 took place, where it says in the Bible concerning Satan, referring to him as the great dragon, he was able to face God and his angels, and his tail drew a third of the angels of heaven and cast them onto the earth. Now, this is not a myth. This is why the Bible is important. It's because this is a historical event. It's not a myth like the Narcissus myth. Because if Narcissus was actually a real character, the power that would have caused him to act that way would be this power, which was the first power in the whole world that demonstrated self-absorption and pride. Pride was the sin of Satan, and it is what he develops in all his children in the world. Now, in Revelation chapter 12, it says there was actually a war in heaven, all right? And God Now, God's mighty angel called Michael, who was in charge of the warring factions of heaven, was able to come against this great dragon and was slay him and cast him down into the earth. And that's what is actually described by the tail of this dragon taking a third of the angels of heaven and casting them down onto the earth. After this event, they did not really change their nature from being angels. No, they remained as angels, but they were now fallen. Because it says in that part in scripture that there was no place in heaven found for them anymore. They were cast out of heaven and into the earth. That is why when Adam and Eve were created, they found a serpent in the Garden of Eden. Where did it come from? They had already been cast out of heaven and into the earth. All right? And Revelation 12 makes it clear. Now, scripture interprets scripture. There is no guesswork. This is a historical event. It's a myth. It's not a story. The scripture describes what happened. It might state something here, but explain it way later. So this serpent, where in the Garden of Eden, Genesis 3, is the same serpent that is described in Revelation chapter 12. Have you understood? Because it says that great dragon, also known as the serpent and Satan, was cast down by Michael and his angels from heaven and unto the earth. Okay. So we also know from Revelation 13 onward, we know that the numbers of angels number in the billions and billions. All right. They are basically innumerable. Therefore, a third of the angels of heaven constitute billions and billions of angels. These are billions of fallen angels who have turned from their holy state into an evil state and have found themselves on the earth. These creatures, I want to present to you are the reason that narcissists exist. Now, at this point in time, allow me to just mention a few things that I'll not be able to explain in this video for the length of it. But as we develop more, as we go forward, I will definitely give you more answers. Definitely give you more answers. But when you come to Genesis chapter 6, an event is given there. An event is given there where it says that the fallen angels came unto the daughters of men. And when they came unto the daughters of men, they chose among them wives of whom they loved, or whoever they wanted, and made children with them. So these are fallen angels which came onto the earth. They copulated with human women, and they gave birth to a race of creatures known as the Nephilim. These Nephilim came to be known as the greatest warriors of the earth. And if you look throughout history, you look at the Egyptian carvings, if you look at the Mongolian carvings, if you look at the histories of the world, all of them describe in art and in oral tradition about these creatures which were as tall as trees. Even the Bible does, even the prophets in the Bible, people like Micah and whatnot, they described, they were talking about Pharaoh. Pharaoh was as tall as a cypress tree. And there are actually anatomical differences to how these superhuman men were to human beings. This is actually the Greek story of Hercules and all this. These were kind of children of the fallen angels and and human women. Actually, this is the reason why in Genesis chapter 7, God saw it fit to send a flood onto the earth, because he was destroying the whole Nephilim race, who are the children of the Nephilim, and the fallen angels and the women. Now, this story might sound fantastical, but there is great evidence. There is great evidence. It's not just something you can wipe away. If you go, say, to the conservative Christians, they like, because you cannot just cut off parts of the Bible. They misinterpret this part of scripture to mean these were the sons of the lineage of Seth, which is very easily refutable anyway, which I'll not be doing in this post. If you want me to refute those kinds of theological claims, if you're a theologian, you're welcome to do so. I'm a theologian myself. So I know what I was taught, but I also know the truth of the matter. I know the errors, because even the man himself who came up with the theory acknowledged that it was false. It was based on an error. Why are we still teaching it in theological schools? We have to accept scripture for what it says. It gives a historical event. This historical event is consistent with many other accounts from other cultures in the world. Okay? And we cannot just conveniently come up with our own religion and explain away using our own myths what have been stated as history and fact in scripture. All right, so these Nephilim who were drowned and were killed in the flood of Noah, Genesis chapter 7. Those Nephilim had souls, and those souls are what came to be known as demons. And if you studied that topic keenly, the fallen angels and the demons have specific characteristics which are not the same, because fallen angels and demons are not the same thing. And the demons are actually the souls of this Nephilim which died and came into the world, and which died in the flood of Noah, and operate now in the world by possessing human beings to do their will and their bidding. This is what creates narcissists in the world. Have you understood? This phenomenon is what creates narcissists in the world. Like I said, at this point, I cannot conclusively say everything. Everything I am saying, I can give evidence for, and I will in the future. But at this point in time, I want to just state it as it is, to state the premise. And then we will go developing that premise with more other premises until we are able to explain why the conclusion is the conclusion that it is. In the meantime, we cannot deny the fact of the reality of the world. There are destructive, very toxic people who clearly demonstrate behaviors which are just beyond a disorder, and things that go around their minds and their houses and their loved ones, activities that are metaphysical and supernatural in state, that are evidenced by the victims and the survivors of narcissism, clearly show that there's more than just a disorder in place. I have dealt with this in previous videos also. Where, for example, I said, how do you explain the black eyes? How do you explain the black eyes? The totally black eyes that some victims have seen in their narcissist. And you cannot gaslight them. You cannot just gaslight them into saying they did not see what they did see just because you didn't see it yourself. This is a phenomenon that is being witnessed worldwide. People with a disorder, a mental disorder, just don't in a face of anger or something, become totally blackened in their eyes. They don't contort. For example, if you listen to, say, John Hagee, a preacher was preaching about uh, one woman that he met once who was demon possessed, and while he was casting the demon out of the woman, the woman's face contorted into the face of a cat. I have also had my own experience with this spirit. So, and it's not just me. You either have to accept that we are not dumb, and that millions of people who are reporting these cases are not just stupid, or you have to just relegate us simply to stupid people who don't know what they're talking about. All of us, all the millions of us worldwide, because we clearly see evidences of behaviors and characteristics which are way beyond just a disorder in personality. There's definitely a power behind this issue. There's a demonic side to narcissism, which we must accept. We have to admit it as it is. Otherwise, we will not be able to know how to go about it. Because you cannot, with your own IQ, solve a spiritual matter. If you're dealing with a spiritual entity, you cannot just come and quote your degrees. You will need something way more. And this is where I actually tell psychologists and trained people who deal with the effects of narcissism in the world, you should be careful also, because if you do not take the spiritual approach, these same entities can haunt your house. And I know psychologists and I know of professionals who've experienced it after trying maybe to come and talk to these prisoners who have committed crimes in the name of narcissism. When they go back home, they cannot explain the footsteps in the house at night. They cannot explain some of them even being raped by creatures they cannot see in the night. And these are things that are happening. These are things that are happening. We cannot deny this reality. This is the source of narcissism. It is a spiritual state which is inspired by wicked spirits which have been operating on the earth, coming against those who are chosen by God to be normal human beings, to be sons of God. Now, if I continue, I will get into the next video. Today, my goal was simply to try and bridge the gap between the spiritualists and the professionals by stating and giving scriptural evidence for their existence of spiritual powers that influence everyone in the world who fits the description of narcissism. Anyone who demonstrates the signs and the symptoms of what has been categorized as narcissism by professionals and spiritualists, all of them show those signs and they show those symptoms very consistently with how the scriptures describe demons. And that in itself is a very potent argument for that case, for the case that Narcissism is spiritually inspired. Now, we will continue building on this later, but be it as it may, rest on that for now. The reason you cannot be able to explain the cause, the reason you cannot be able to explain the ending, the reason no one in the world has a solution for this phenomenon is because of its origin in demonology. Stay hard, stay blessed.